Hello once again, and welcome to Kath Reade's Travel Tales. We're starting a new one today, episode 1 of Kea, a secret Greek island. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. At last, Paul and I are going to Kea, the Greek island that no one you ask has ever heard of, and long may it be so. I had only discovered it when a Greek friend had taken me there in his cruiser on a gin and tonic jaunt around the Aegean Sea. Ever since then, I'd wanted to visit again with my husband, Paul, who prefers the rain-swept mountains of Scotland. But I'd finally persuaded him to indulge me in this beautiful Greek island for our 28th wedding anniversary. Hooray! So we got a taxi from Athens airport at 7 o'clock in the morning down to the port of Lavrio. Many homeless dogs roam the quayside here, hungry for food and affection. The taxi driver didn't know the way and radioed for directions. Once in Lavrio, he asked a local where the ferry was. So that was surprising in view of how many Athenians go to Kea for their weekend breaks. But it is certainly not on the tourist beaten track of the well-known Greek holiday islands. We stood at the virtually deserted dockside in the early morning, us and the dogs. An elderly man strolled nearby, and they followed him for a while, but returned to sniff hungrily at our luggage. Their fur was grubby and patchy, and they were used to foraging and surviving on the streets. However, my Greek friend had previously told me the local people collectively see the dogs as belonging to their community, and so they do get fed scraps. The ferry arrived, with its ramp scraping forward on the quay. Cars and motorbikes streamed off of it. Some of the dogs took exception to this, running and barking, particularly at the motorbikes and mopeds, and then giving up and loping back. We boarded our ferry to sail to the tiny island of Kea, and the sun was already very hot at 9 o'clock in the morning. There seemed to be a curious absence of bird life on this part of the Aegean Sea. We thought of our ferry sails round the Western Isles of Scotland and noticed how similar this was, except that around Scotland there are many types of seabirds flying across the sea. The other big difference, of course, is the weather, which usually renders the Scottish sky and sea steely grey, instead of this pure azure blue. Suddenly, we saw the amazing sight of a silver swordfish come barrelling vertically out of the blue sea and back in. The only one I've ever seen. The island of Kea was hazy, and its mountains rose up golden brown with clouds lingering over the tops. Its tiny port of Corycia was bustling with the business of the ferry arrival, soon to subside to its usual sleepy, quiet days in the sun. We dragged our wheeled suitcases along the narrow port side, which is lined with about 3 or 4 tavernas and a couple of small shops, but it's far from geared up to tourism. we never met another English person during our stay. 2 minutes later, we were on the beautiful tiled terrace of the Hotel Kath Reade, with its canvas chairs and enormous terracotta pots of flowering bushes and cacti, just a few yards from the sea. It's a family-run hotel, very simple, but it felt like we were staying with the family at times. A large woman of great age and girth, with a lived-in face, checked us in. She had no English, why should she? We used our Greek phrase book to explain that our Greek friend had made us a reservation. She asked for our name. Reade, we said. Thade? She thundered quizzically. Finally she nodded and gave us a room key. The room had a balcony to the side, and by craning your head you could just about see the beach. Having missed a night's sleep, we threw ourselves onto the bed. And later, as we unpacked, we found there were only 2 coat hangers in the wardrobe. We went down to reception, wondering how to communicate our need for more to the elderly matriarch. But another young woman was there who spoke a little English, and she told us we'd been shown to the wrong room. Ours was a better one, with a large balcony at the front, with panoramic views. It was reached by 2 steep flights of marble stairs, no lift, and we were glad because it meant some enforced exercise. The room was lovely, again simple and basic, but with air conditioning, essential in 30+ degrees for we Celtic types. The balcony overlooked the whole port, the bay, the open sea, and the layers of rugged mountains stretching back from the sea, up to the high village of Iulis on the hilltop. As we sat on our white plastic chairs on the balcony, we could watch the Keenan life go on. The old men strolling to the small traditional fishing boats and buying fish that had just been caught. The women on mopeds visiting the bakery and riding off with freshly baked loaves hanging in bags from the handlebars. The workmen, brown and dusky, with cigarettes held between their lips, being driven off in dusty, battered vans. The ferry officers, dressed in pristine white uniforms, bit like Richard Gere, came to and fro on mopeds and held their white peaked caps under their arms to supervise the arrivals and departures of the ferries, of the Gotus line. The dark and handsome, stunning young men on powerful motorbikes, no crash helmets and clad in shorts. And always the children, their brown, lithe little bodies, never still, playing games for hours with each other, with very little in the way of toys and actually seeming to need none. They were so active and healthy growing up on Kia. Their childhood seemed to be what every child, should have. The parents and the rest of the family, although loving, did not overprotect them or mollycoddle them, and neither do they shun them or shout at them. They leave them to play fight, to wrestle, to invent their games, and play in the sun, testing their limits and learning together. They went on playing through the sunset and on until 10 or 11 and even midnight some nights. A group of 7 or 8 boys of ages from 9 to 11 were out every day, and I got to know each one by sight. They were very physical and robust, often fighting quite hard with each other and appearing to knock the living daylights out of each other. But as I watched, I came to realise it was a healthy way of getting rid of their energy and pent-up aggression, which they all seemed to enjoy equally, and there was no bullying. One day I saw them on the beach with farm implements. They were working very hard, digging an enormous rectangular hole in the sand. They unfolded a huge square of clear plastic, and with a buoy at each corner, carried it into the sea and tried to submerge it, which was not easy. Watching from the balcony, I saw them carry the sheet to the hole and lay it in with an edge all the way round the top, like a pie crust. They then got a carrier bag each and ran to and fro busily from the sea, filling the hole up with water. All this was done in the full heat of the day. And when their homemade swimming pool was full, they all jumped in together like a shoal of small fish. It was just big enough to hold them all, and they sat laughing and splashing and pushing each other around, happy in their own world of camaraderie. I turned to Paul and said, "These are going to be the best days of their lives." One of them ran off and returned with some creamy yellow liquid soap, which they emptied in, and they all flapped their hands in the water, making a huge bubble bath. Then they ran and jumped in, slid in, and even dived in. To wash the bubbles off, they all ran into the sea and started swimming the crawl, and they swam like fish, like children born by the sea. They swam about 200 yards out without stopping to a small rowing boat that was anchored, and they pulled up their glistening brown bodies onto the boat and then dived in and swam back. As soon as they were back on the shore, they started a sand fight, which involved throwing handfuls of wet sand at each other, dodging and chasing around, shouting and laughing. Finally, they folded up the plastic sheet and filled in the hole and came to the road where their bikes just lay on the ground. They put their sandy feet into their trainers and mounted their bikes, balancing various spades, hoes and trowels, and rode off heedlessly through the zigzagging cars that chaotically manoeuvre around the narrow street along the quayside. Later that night, as we ate under the stars at a taverna beside the sea in Corissia, we watched a crowd of girls playing an inscrutable game which involved one tall, thin 11-year-old bossing 5 or 6 others around as if she was a teacher. They were all evidently under her control and generally did her bidding. They acted like school pupils. They all seemed to be enjoying it. She had long, wild, wavy black hair and stick-like arms and legs. Her eyes were black as the olives on our Greek salad, and I loved her fiery spirit. The children of Kia are a joy and a delight. And that's the end of episode 1. So do join me again at 4 o'clock UK time tomorrow, and we'll go off on our adventures on such a beautiful island of Kia. Bless you. Take care. See you later.